Okay, it's 2 minutes past 10, so I know there's still people joining. So whilst they're doing that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about an experience I had with verification, identity verification, about 6 months ago, because I think it's really relevant to today. So about 6 months ago, I was changing banks, and I was moving to one of the major banks, probably because they had some offer on or something. And they sent me a welcome email. They said, welcome on board. That was all great. And they said, we now need to verify your identity. So I thought, great. I clicked the button in the email and logged onto my computer, and I went through identity verification on my desktop. And as I was going through the identity verification, I was asked to upload my passport, and then I was asked to kind of do the biometric component, so scan my face, and they were trying to match it up. And I just got error. It didn't tell me why it had failed. It didn't tell me what had gone wrong. It just said it's not worked. It just said, please try it again. So I tried it again, and I just got the same error with no guidance on what to do to get it right, which was the most annoying bit, because I felt like I'm quite a tech savvy person, and to the best of my knowledge, I was doing this whole thing right. And then it said, right, you've got to go into the branch and show them your passport. And this whole process was just really frustrating, because I remember thinking at the time, how has one of the major banks adopted a solution that's this rubbish? It really didn't sit right with me. And this whole experience just highlighted to me, and it came at a really good time because we were building this out, how important the details are with these types of solutions, because they're not just impacting us as business owners or accountants, they're impacting our clients and how our clients feel about us. So whenever we're looking for solutions, we need to be scrutinizing them to really make sure that they're not providing the same kind of experience I had. And if anything, it served as an example of what not to do with the launch of these ID checks. And it was one of our guiding principles, was how do we make this a great experience for both the accountant and the accountant's client? And that is a big focus for today. And for years and years, our members have been asking us to build AML at GoProposal. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we went on this journey to truly understand why. What is the value we can bring to this space? You know, there are solutions on the market already which you can use. So what value, what difference can we make here? And that's when we started speaking to members in interviews, digging really deep into what pain points they were having with either their current systems or their current processes, and speaking with experts as well to uncover the true value we think we can bring to this space. And that's where the product was born. And we launched risk assessments about a year ago, whilst we were working really hard to figure out who we were going to partner with for this ID check solution. And now we're at a point where we can confidently give this to you guys, show it you guys, and that's going to be the purpose of today. But if anyone just gets anything from today, regardless of whether you choose to use us or you go with someone else, I just really hope it helps you guys feel closer to what it is you should be doing with AML, because from the conversations I've been having, I know it's really overwhelming. I know it's confusing a lot of people. And if anything, if we can do anything, I just want people to have a takeaway at the end of this session, something that's going to go and help them improve those processes and feel more confident in them. So before I move on then, I just wanted to introduce who I've got on the call. So I've got myself, product manager for the AML, for the Oversuite products. And I've also got Valerie Stewart, the lovely Valerie Stewart, who you'll all know. She co-wrote one of the main Institute's anti-money laundering modules, and she's been a real guide throughout this process. So hi Val, good to have you on it.
Hi, see you all later.
Yeah, so she'll be here at the end to help answer those burning compliance questions that might come off the back of the session. So what are we going to run through in today's session then? So the first thing we're going to be talking about is what the reality is of AML for most firms at the moment and where we want to get to. And then we're going to talk about how you guys can avoid the common traps that professionals are often falling into, which I've been speaking to Val about and other experts, other bodies about. Then I'm going to help you guys truly understand what your AML processes should be achieving. And so we're going to dig deep into what that AML process should look like with a client and what your ID checking process should look like, especially now we're in a more digital era. And from there, I'm going to show you how you can actually get all of this right and then leverage the right systems to make AML actually an opportunity to better your client relationships. So let's move forwards. First of all, I just want to touch briefly on the reality for most firms. So AML doesn't just apply to client onboarding, it applies to the whole of the client relationship. But for the sake of explaining this, let's think we're onboarding a client. So what we've found is firms are onboarding clients, and when they have news that that client is going to come on board, they've then got to get all their AML stuff done. And they're following a very fragmented process from the point where they're doing that. So what I mean by that is they're often using 2 to 4 systems to just get that client onboarded. So they might be using something for a proposal, something for a risk assessment, something else for an ID check, and then something else for the rest of it. And there's this sense of just wanting to have everything in a single place, in a place that's easy to manage and easy to use. And also these fragmented processes can lead to sort of disjointed processes, the issues with doing things manually leading to mistakes. So the first thing they want to solve is just not having to use so many different pieces of software. And then on top of that, as they're doing this process, they're still spending way too much time on admin. So this won't be everyone, but there's definitely still a good proportion of firms that are chasing their clients for identity documents, getting frustrated when they're not reading the instructions that they've sent them, and then verifying those identity documents manually as well. So way too much time is being spent on this, and it's frustrating for people. And then what we find is we're doing this process and we're still not confident in what we're doing. So people have been asking me questions like, what type of ID check should I be doing? How often should I be doing a risk assessment? Is what I'm doing enough, basically? And that's the biggest thing I think that pops out all the time. And then beyond that, it's frustration, because we're doing all of these things and we're feeling really frustrated because we can't get paid to do it. We think, well, I can't even charge my client for this. It's not billable work, and we're frustrated because we're not getting paid for it. And the thing is, this part of the relationship is the part where you're meant to be impressing your client. You've just brought them on board, and it's the equivalent of a hotel check-in, basically. And imagine if you could turn this into something that your clients enjoyed being part of, something that made them feel closer to you. And that, I think, is where we want to get to with it. And it's really interesting, because when people are coming on board with this, with these solutions, they're not thinking about how it's making the customer feel. And in reality, this is an opportunity to change how your customer feels towards you, towards the business, as much as it is an opportunity to make things right. So what is the goal then? We know that this is the reality. We can see that that's 84% of people in the chat at least. So where do we want to help you guys get to then? We want to help you guys get into a position where you know that what you're doing is accurate, and you know you're definitely not doing anything illegal. You're combating financial crime effectively, because this isn't just about checking a box to fulfill the governing body's practice assurance visit. It's about genuinely combating financial crime, because you guys are at the forefront of it, unfortunately. It's keeping everything in one place, in a place that's easy for everyone to use, easy for everyone to manage. And all of the admin heavy, unimportant tasks have been automated. And beyond that, once we've done all of that, how can we pave the way for an incredible client relationship from the outset, just like we already do with GoProposal, but beyond with AML? And I feel like if I could say to you tomorrow, you could have all of those things, you'd be like, yes, please sign me up. Sorry, I don't know, I just saw this passport thing up. But so you might think, okay, this is great, why now? There's a million things that are on my priority list. Why should I do this now? And I can assure you, now is the time to act if you're going to act. And I'll explain to you why that is. So this is a little bit of a timeline as to what's been going on in the space. It's not to scare anyone, but it's just to help you understand why there's this crackdown on compliance now. So in 2016, the government had an initiative to crack further down on money laundering, because it costs them so much money each year. And off the back of that, they established OPBAS. Now, OPBAS are this framework, this supervisory body that have come in to regulate the professional bodies for accountants and some of the legal sector. So their eyes are on all of the professional bodies, and in turn, this impacts you. And what we see happen is, as we come out of COVID, the professional bodies start to increase the value of fines. The total number of fines being issued to firms for non-compliance increases, and the number of desk-based visits where they come and see you to look at your AML processes increases as well. And we get to the point where we're in 2023 and the total number of fines issued by some of the major bodies has increased by 200% since 2018. So this isn't to scare anyone, but it's just to show you that there's an increasing crackdown on it. And even despite all of this that the professional bodies have been doing, this OPBAS regulatory framework have still come out and said the professional bodies need to step up their efforts as the first line of defence against AML threats. So it is still very much an issue. It's not being solved, and we can only expect more of this in 2023, 2024. We don't quite know what those changes are going to look like yet, but there are some discussions between OPBAS and the professional bodies as to how it's going to work. And I think this is really nicely echoed in the things that our members are telling us when we speak to them. So when we speak to our members, they tell us that I just had a practice assurance visit and 80% of it was AML. 85%, it's like they didn't care about anything else. And we've had several members say this to us. So it is really important. It is going to be, eyes are on it if they haven't been already, and it's the perfect time to get it right. And I think I just want to point out as well that the digital era, the digital space has only increased the risk of money laundering and identity fraud, because now there's so much information online. You know, you can go on social media. I don't know what's happening with this, sorry. You can go on social media and get a wealth of information on somebody. You can go on data aggregation sites. They literally sell you data. Being online means systems and software are more prone to and vulnerable to cyber attacks, which actually means all of these things, it's much easier for a fraudster to commit identity fraud. And because of the anonymity available now with things like cryptocurrency, it's also much easier to hide behind transactions and create fake businesses. So the digital era has only propelled this and made it even more overwhelming and complicated. So with that in mind then, what are the common traps to avoid with AML? So the first thing is seeing the process as too much of a checkbox exercise. So what we find is that the biggest thing that comes from the professional bodies and from the experts that we've spoken to, like the lovely Val on the call here, is firms are still seeing it as a checkbox exercise. And that's because we don't get paid for it. We just want to get it done. And so we end up just picking a piece of software and relying on that to make it right, or because they tell us it's the right thing to do and it's maybe not. Using risk assessment templates, using policy templates, and just not carefully considering why we're doing what we're doing, why we're verifying our clients in the way that we are, what our policies should be, and what our processes are. And this checkbox approach is probably one of the biggest issues, because it means we're not actually carefully assessing risk of money laundering. We're not thinking about what we need to do. And this isn't to blame anyone. It's really hard when you're a business owner and or if you're a small business and you're expected to take on this extra role of understanding all of these complicated regulations. I would see it as a checkbox exercise, because I'd be thinking, I want to make money for the business. But unfortunately, as we've seen, you guys are seen as the first line of defense against AML threats. So not seeing it as a checkbox approach and carefully considering everything from the risk assessment to your policies and to the software you're using is of paramount importance now. And I think this ties really nicely into the next one, which is a lot of the governing bodies will do visits and people won't have adequate AML policies in place. They'll use an AML policy given to them by a piece of software, or they'll use an AML policy that their friend has, and they just won't adjust it to their firm. So the governing body comes in and they look at your policy and they go, well, this is completely different to what I can see you're doing in practice. And so if there's one thing you go and do off the back of today's session, I would make sure that you've got an up-to-date, relevant policy in place. Maybe some of what you learned from today and through seeing our software might influence that. What should those policies contain? They should contain things like how we verify our clients. Do we meet them face to face? What type of ID check do we do? How often do we risk assess our clients to make sure that we're on top of it? What's our process? Do we meet our clients face to face? What's our process for enhanced clients that are in enhanced risk? And it sounds really overwhelming and really confusing. But if you've got a policy in place that you're comfortable with, that you can justify, I can promise you that you're in a much better position for that next practice assurance visit, because you can sit there and go, this is why we're doing what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. And that's what they're looking for. You're not seeing it as a checkbox approach if you're doing that. And once you've got these policies in place, even though it sounds really complicated, it actually underpins everything else. So once you've got a great policy in place, everything else becomes much, much easier, because it's your go-to document for making sure everybody on the team knows what they're doing. The third mistake that often crops up is not broadening AML to embody the entire client relationship. And what we mean by that is that I don't just mean having something switched on that tells you when someone suddenly becomes politically exposed or sanctioned. Yes, that's a good feature, but that's not everything. You need to be regularly reviewing your client risk assessments, because there might be a normal risk of money laundering today, and in a year there might be a high risk of money laundering because they bring new directors on board, they change the way they do their services, they suddenly start trading in a different way. So you should have a system in place that's allowing you to regularly review your client risk assessment, and you should be constantly, everybody on the team should be constantly incorporating AML into the work they're doing for a client. It's not a one and done task. So when we take on a cash-based business, for example, that's naturally a higher risk of money laundering. And it's not just being able to prove the validity of their business and their transactions at the start of the relationship. This is probably a measure you want to have in place whilst you're working with that client. So it's really important that everyone on the team understands when they're working with a high-risk client and what the mitigatory steps are, say, for example, when they're doing the accounts or the financial statements. And if you can get all of this right, you're in a much better place, and you can be much more confident in what you're doing. And this isn't a trap, and it's not really a mistake, because it's really difficult, but just uncertainty and a lack of confidence in what we're doing. We've heard cases of identity checking solutions saying, if you do this, you're completely compliant. That's never a phrase any piece of software should ever use, for starters. And it completely depends on your processes. So until you know what your processes are, only then can you go and pick the right system for you. I think a really good example of the checkbox approach as well is when there's certain features online. So there's things like reusable client risk assessments that people have been asking me about. And I'm not 100% confident in doing that. I can't find a good reason to do it. And it's because, if anything, I feel like that's steering us more towards a checkbox approach, because it means we're just reusing the same template on a client, and we're probably not treating them objectively enough. So we just have to be very careful about the things that are being sold to us and figure out for ourselves what our processes are. Don't let anyone else tell you what it should be. I think that's actually the main things the bodies and everywhere else are looking for. So with all of that in mind, then, what should your AML process look like, and how can we avoid all of these traps? So what I've done is put together a bit of a diagram, which I'm going to work through. And these are the key things that you want to be hitting on. So the first thing you'll see is it's a circular diagram. It's not going in one direction. And that's just to represent the fact that risk is continuously evolving. Your client's risk is continuously changing. So it's something that you should just be vigilant of all the time, as opposed to treating it as just, we'll get the client on board and then we'll leave it. So the first thing is, okay, how do I know my client? So whether it's a new client or even an existing client, do I know who they are? Can I paint a picture of them in my head? How many directors have they got? What services are we delivering? Where do they operate? Can I really clearly see that picture in my mind? And then, have I verified their identity? So can I confirm that this picture I've built of them is true? And that the way we do that is by collecting verification documents, and the purpose of them is to make you confident you know who they say they are. They are who they say they are. The second thing is the client risk assessment. So we know who they are, we've painted a picture. What's their risk of money laundering? And this is where we need to be really careful to avoid any blind spots. So just because they're a family friend or we know them, it doesn't mean that they don't need to go through the same objective, thorough process. Also, the client risk assessment, this is where we want to avoid a checkbox. As annoying as it might be to do, we want to be really thinking about this client and thinking, is that a risk of money laundering? And once we've done that, we then want to think, okay, what is the risk of this client? Am I comfortable that I can mitigate these risks? So if it's a cash-based business, what am I going to do both now and as the relationship progresses to keep that risk at bay? Am I confident that I can do that? And the firm-wide risk assessment, which people hear about a lot, if we've got that in place, that should be guiding your whole team on how we handle risk in the business, because it will basically say, right, if we've got any PEPs, this is what you need to do. If you've got any, we deal with a lot of high net worth individuals, this is how we mitigate those risks. So that's also kind of part of that policy in my mind. Okay, once we're happy we can bring the client on board, are we documenting absolutely everything? So should a practice assurance reviewer come and see you tomorrow, have you got a client file that's up to date that you can say, this is the risk assessment, this is why they're high risk, this is how we're mitigating it, this is the verification document, so I know who they are, and this is when we last reviewed it. Have you got all of that somewhere in a place that's easy to read and easy to access? And are the team aware? Because this is the thing, that the client manager onboarding the client doing the AML might not be the person that's working with the client that needs to be aware of the risk. So we need to get better at sharing this information with the team and taking AML on as a team task rather than an individual task. And then, unfortunately, we have to go around and do the whole thing again, but not just kind of once each year. If you know something has changed in the business, so you know they're suddenly changing the way they operate, or there's a new director, then you want to be updating that as soon as you can, really. And then you can see in the top right here, have I got an up-to-date AML policy? Because that AML policy will make this whole thing easier, because it will describe how you verify your clients, how you verify higher risk clients, how you risk assess your clients, how often you risk assess them, how you deal with enhanced risk. So if you've got that policy in place, the rest of this then falls into place, to my mind, the way I look at it. And just a reminder as well, if you decide to fail a client because you think, well, they seem a bit dodgy, then how does a suspicious activity report need to be raised to either management, and then do management need to raise that to the National Crime Agency? So that is also something to consider as well. I feel like that's a lot, but if you can get all of this round, you're definitely a lot further and avoiding the mistakes we've just spoken about. What I want to focus on now is identity verification, because we get asked all the time. I mean, when we were doing the research for the ID checks, they were saying to us, I was asking people, what type of ID check are you running? And they went, oh, I don't know, it does a PEP, it does a sanction, I think it does this. When you're looking to choose identity verification, the most important thing is to think, why are we doing identity verification in the first place? And the reason we're doing identity verification is to be able to confirm that our client is who they say they are. So regardless of whether you're using system X or system Y, what you want to be doing is figuring out that you can tick all of these 4 things off when you're running an identity check. So the 4 things are, can I prove they live where they say they live? Have I seen a valid copy of the identity document, and can I be confident that it's the original document, that it's not been tampered with? Is the person I'm dealing with the person on the identity document? So or is it them? Because they could just give you a passport, you might never see them, and then so well, I don't know whose passport is this. And have I documented all of this as evidence? So those are the 4 key things to be thinking about. And people will tackle this in different ways. In the past, and even still now, you would go and meet every client face to face. You would request a copy of the identity document, request a proof of address document, and you'd store that. But nowadays, more and more people are using technology to do this. And if you are using technology to do this, that's great. Just make sure it's helping you hit these 4, because what we find is most solutions will be covering maybe 1 and 2, or 1 and 2 and 3, and that's fine too. That's still really useful, but it just means you need to make sure you've got the other bits that aren't being covered off by the software in your processes. And this is why I'm always tying it back to the AML policy. You can use whatever type of ID check you want. It's just, okay, do I know what I need to do if I'm using this type of ID check? Am I covering everything off? So hopefully that's helpful in clarifying the purpose behind that. So once we've done all this, tying back to the HSBC case before, how do we turn compliance into an opportunity? So something that helps us build better client relationships from the outset. If you remember with GoProposal, the idea is that we send a proposal out, we send an engagement letter out, we present it really professionally to the client, they can sign it straight away, so there's no barriers. How do we continue that with our AML systems? And that is the kind of thing we want to be thinking about. And what we find is most firms are there or somewhat there with managing practice risk for the firm. So they might be going and getting all their AML stuff in place now. But few firms are seeing it as an opportunity to elevate the client relationship and become mutually focused. So what's the goal then? Just to remind you at the start of everything we spoke about, we want to know we're doing what we should be doing and nothing illegal. We want to know that we're combating financial crime effectively. So we've tackled those two, hopefully, with a bit more reading around it. We want to make sure we're keeping everything in one place in a way that's easy to understand, and we want to elevate client relationships. And I'm going to move to the demo. This slideshow is really annoying me. So what I'm going to show you now is the ID checks for GoProposal AML as a whole, and we'll go from there. So the first thing you'll notice about the system is you can manage and track all proposal and AML activity from a single dashboard. So what this means is as soon as your client proposal has been accepted, here I'm looking at the example of Barring Down Engineers, the system is going to instantly trigger an ID check and risk assessment in pending for both the company and the individual related to that company. So there's no barriers to getting that client onboarded, and you can go from proposal to client risk assessed and verified in one system. Much saving a lot of time doing it in that way. And then what you'll also see is there are triggers on the dashboard letting you know when a client's ID check might need a review, not necessarily a renew, and I'm happy to come back to that at the end, and when a client's risk assessment is due a renewal as well. And if you're looking at this, you can start to think about opportunity already, because there are lots of things you need to be doing on a regular basis with a client. So, for example, when we're looking at this client's ID here and we're reviewing it, can we also tie this in as an opportunity to review their current pricing proposal, make sure that we're on top of scope creep and making sure that we're delivering as much value to them as possible? So we can tie these systematic processes in that we feel annoyed about with something that can create opportunity. And by being able to see it clearly on a dashboard here in front of you, it's going to make it a lot easier to do that. So let's take a look at an ID check then. So if I go into a client record, so here I've gone into the record of an organization, the first thing I want to point out is that you can manage all AML activity for that organization from a single record. And what I mean by that is you can see all of the ID checks that are pending or the status that they're in for the business, so all the directors and beneficial owners. And you can see all KYC and risk assessments as well for the business and the individuals related to that business. And the reason that we've done this is so that you don't have to jump in and out of records. You can just manage that business, if it is an organization, from one record. And when you start to get up to sort of 3 directors, 4 directors, 7 beneficial owners, it becomes a lot more valuable to be able to do it in this way, because the client manager can just see it in front of them. So what I'm going to do now is run an ID check. So we've got 3 types of verification check that we're offering in GoProposal AML. And the type of ID check that you're going to need is going to be dependent on what your AML processes are, which I keep coming back to, but things like whether you meet your client face-to-face or not, how long you've been working with the client, because understandably you don't need to do a full biometric check with an existing client. And the document and biometric checks over here, they represent the more sophisticated checks. So what both of these checks will do for you is they'll automatically collect your client's identity document, they'll automatically store that document, and it'll automatically verify it whilst your client is submitting the information. And I think a really, really key thing to point out here is everything will be done in that one verification journey, which I'll show you in a minute. So you don't have to manually intervene at any point in the process until the check results come back to you. So let's take a look at the most belts and braces approach. So this is a biometric check. So you might have heard of it. You've probably done one for the bank. I had to do one for HSBC and it was rubbish. So we've used this as a guide as to what not to do. But a biometric check is the belts and braces approach. So it is the best way to be completely confident in your client's identity and that they are who they say they are if you're not going to be seeing them physically. And just to echo that, it's been adopted by areas of the government. My friend did a DBS check the other day and they just said, oh, Danielle, I've just done a biometric. That's how nerdy I am. And then they also did, they've also been adopted by the big banks as well. So the biometric check is definitely the most accurate, reliable and secure way to be confident in your client's identity if you're not going to see them. So I'm going to show you this one first, and then I'm going to show you the options we have for less tech savvy clients or clients that might have objections to mobile apps, for example. So all you need to do for the biometric check is add the country of residence in and their mobile number. If they're an overseas client, that's not a problem. We can verify anyone in the world on this list. So you can verify their identity and you can also verify their address internationally. All you need to do is hit send. It really is as simple as that. Everything else will be done for you, including chasing your client for identity documents that if they don't provide them. I'm going to move you on to the biometric flow now. So your client's going to receive a text message. They're going to say, please, could you download the Third4 app? And they're going to do their full verification check in this app. Now, just to talk to you a little bit about Third4, I know some of the guys are on the call today. So Third4 are our chosen partner to power the biometric checks and the ID checks in GoProposal. And the reason for that is because out of everybody that we looked at tons and tons of market solutions. These guys boasted the most incredible customer sentiment. So they have in-app chat support. So if your client is struggling with a check, they will support them directly. They have a 4.5-star app review or higher. So that just shows how easy it is to use and how well people get on with it and how client friendly it is. And above that, they share the same values as GoProposal. So we're both on this same mission to kind of elevate client relationships and remove barriers to AML for accountants and other people in the sector. And so that's why we came to this choice. And I think as I take you through this video, you'll be able to see why. So this is the journey your client will go on. They'll be presented with a list of tasks in the Third4 app very clearly. And the first thing they'll do is provide their address. And this is so we can validate the proof of their proof of address. So they don't need to supply a proof of address document unless this fails. And this will look at common data sources like Experian to make sure that they do live at that address. And then it will move on to the identity verification. The identity verification, all that's required again is that your client needs to upload either a passport or a driver's license. It does accept other forms of ID. And as you can see, there's inbuilt guidance so the client knows exactly where to go, exactly what to look at to take the photograph. So avoiding that horrible HSBC case, showing them what they need to do. Once it accesses the camera, again, it will have real-time guidance. So as the customer's scanning the passport, it'll be telling them things like avoid a white background and make sure that you've got everything in the view, and it will only ever be returned to you once it's worked. You won't get a report back that says this has failed because they've uploaded a document with glare on it. And again, this is where the devil's in the details and where on genuinely software are doing this. Once you've scanned the passport, they're then going to be taken to the NFC chip. Now, not every client has an NFC chip, but if they do, then it will scan it on the passport, and that will just be used to add additional information to the report that gives you even more confidence because it's using the NFC details on the chip of the passport, which is very, very hard to forge, very hard to fake. Once the NFC chip technology has been scanned, the customer is then going to scan their face, and this is how we can verify their identity without having to see them ourselves. So it uses very advanced technology to look at the features of this individual and compare it to what's on the passport, what's on the NFC chip. And just to highlight here as well, if that address check should fail, in the app directly, the customer is going to be asked to upload proof of address. So you don't have to go back to them and say, please, could you send me the proof of address? If it fails, they'll be asked to do that in real time, which means you're going to get everything you need back on that report to make a decision rather than having to go back and contact your client to ask them for things. And that, I don't think there's anything I've missed here, is the app flow. And once they're completed, it will say your tasks are complete, and you will receive the report back in your system. So what will happen is you'll get an email saying a biometric check has been completed on behalf of James Clark here, and please log into your Client Hub to review the results. When we click on review results over here, you'll see there are different outcomes. So what you can see in this situation is the outcome is consider, because one or more items on the report have come back as consider. It doesn't mean you can't work with the client, it means something needs your attention. And decision required. It also stores the expiration date for you. I'll come back to that one in a minute. And what you need to do then is just view the report and decide whether you're going to approve or decline this check. So at this point, all you've had to do is put a phone number and an email address in to get to this point. And this is the biometric identity report. So you get a wealth of information on this report. It will show you that the client is the person on the identity document. So if you haven't seen them, you haven't met them, you're not going to see them in person, in real life, then this is the best way to be confident in their identity. It will also tell you things like what this document report means is it's a valid document, so there's no signs of tampering, it hasn't been messed with. It will verify their address for you, and here you can see it says consider. But what you'll also see down at the bottom is there's a proof of address document that the client previously supplied that you can check against this database address match, so you can pass it if you've got a sufficient proof of address. And it will also flag if the client is on the sanctions list or is politically exposed. All you need to do is approve or decline that check in the system, and then you can move on to the risk assessment. Now, I'm also going to show you the document check. So the document check is a great thing to use if you are going to meet your client face-to-face, but maybe you just can't do it right now before you bring them on board. So you are at some point going to have proof that they are who they say they are. It's not going to be too long into the process, but you don't want to delay the onboarding. It's also great if you've got less tech-savvy clients who don't want to download an app. We often find the reality of this situation, though, is much better than what we think. More people these days are willing to download an app to do a check and are more used to it than we might think in our heads about our clients. So I just want to point that one out because it's such a valuable way to verify somebody. But with the document check, you can use it, it's still great. It will just miss out on that biometric component. So with the document check, you've actually got two options. If your client's really not tech savvy and they can't even be using a computer, for example, then you can run the document check yourself, or you can send it to the client. Similar to the biometric, you just put in a phone number and an email address. And similar to the biometric again, this has to be valid. Similar to the biometric again, you can set up a chaser. So you can decide if the client doesn't respond within 24 hours or 7 days, I'm going to resend that check request once or twice, and that'll go through to them on text message and email before you get an email alert saying we've chased them 3 times and they've not responded. So you can do that to automate the heavy lifting. And as soon as you click next, it's going to send that check off to the client. Your client's going to receive an email and a text message, and they'll be clicking the button here that will take them straight through to their client identification portal. It'll be customized to your brand, and they'll verify their identity this way instead of through the app. So when we click start now, put my name in, I put my date of birth in, put my address in, and then I can use a passport or a driver's license in this web portal. Click next. It will give them guidance. So this is how you need to upload your passport. And something I really want to highlight here, again, similar to the app, if the passport is uploaded and the image is not good enough quality, we'll tell them there and then. So we'll never feed back a report to you that says this has failed because the image was cut off on the corner or there was glare. We'll do as much as we can to offer that guidance to the client as they're working through the process. Click next, and then again, just click run check. The check will be ran, so this is your client's perspective. And then when you come back to your contact hub, you will just be able to view the report like with the biometric and approve or decline. When you're viewing that report, you'll see with this, there's a slight difference. So we don't have that facial match. So if you are doing a document check, you will want to see your client in some way. If If you can't see them face to face, you might be able to use Zoom or a virtual meeting to get them to hold their passport up on Zoom, and you can look at their face. But just be very careful with this one, because different governing bodies are offering different guidance around the appropriateness of Zoom at the minute, and because of things like Zoom counterfeits and stuff like that. So if you are using this type of check, you still need a way of seeing your client's face, because you haven't actually got anything in here that shows you, your client is that person, but you're still getting a wealth of information that is going to give you a lot of confidence. So what you'll get in here is that the document is valid, it's authentic, it's an original, it's not been tampered with. You'll get an address verification, so you will see that the client lives where they're saying they live, and they'll be flagged for any sanctions or politically exposed individuals as well. So a wealth of information here. Again, you just want to maybe go and see that client in some way to confirm that they are the ones supplying this information, if that makes sense. And again, if we come back, just look at the final check very quickly. We've got a basic check, still a great check to use. If you are still meeting your clients face to face, and you don't need to use the system, or you're collecting the documents manually from them and you're checking that they are the person on that document, then you just need to use this one here. If you go with this one here, then all you need to do is 2023. All you need to do is hit send, and it'll be done directly within the app. So you just need the name and the address, and it will instantly run that check for you within sort of 30 seconds to a minute. You might have to refresh the page until the results come through. And with the basic check, the report is just going to tell you their address is verified, they're not on any sanctions lists, and they're not politically exposed. With any check, it will come back again as a decision required, or it might come back as auto approved, which means everything's passed. Either way, we still ask that you approve that check, because we do need you to have an audit trail of why you've approved an identity check or not. We can never automatically pass anything for you, because that is, again, facilitating a checkbox approach, which is exactly what we don't want to do. We want to automate as much as the rubbish as we can, to then free up your time to focus on properly evaluating the situation. Once you've done the ID check, just to make you aware, there's also KYC and risk assessments in the system, and those KYC and risk assessments have been written by Val. We update them for you every quarter, and we tailor them to the type of company or type of individual. So you're only answering the type of questions that are necessary, but we're continuously updating those and making sure they're relevant. We click into a limited company one, let's take a look at the client risk assessment. So it's purposely been designed to avoid the checkbox approach. There is a question by question way of looking at it, as opposed to one big list that we just go tick, 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 tick on. So as you go through the client risk assessment, you'll see there's the conditional logic and automation. So only when you answer yes to a certain question does it then bring up other questions. So it should save you some time in that respect, but it will ask you what it needs to. Once it's asked you this question here, it will then flag to you any enhanced risks. So in this example here, we've got a high net worth individual. We've not been able to establish a source of wealth and funds. So it's then giving us some guidance as to what we might do to mitigate that risk, both now and at the start of the relationship. And this is what we want to document and have in our risk plan that we can share with the team. So we might say we need to, regularly review accounts and financial statements and make sure everything seems reasonable for the business, for a business of this nature. And that's your task, and that's what you want to put into that client risk assessment. So as you go through the questions, you'll see lots of different examples here. So have you had the opportunity to personally meet the client and verify their identity documents? Again, if you select no, it's not going to instantly flag an enhanced risk and say, have you discovered an alternative method to ensure your satisfaction regarding their identity? If we put yes, then that risk is already mitigated. If we click no, then we're saying, you need to do this ASAP, essentially. And you keep working through that client risk assessment until you've got a tailored risk plan for that client. It can be approved, so the details of who's approved, it will be in there. You can set up MLRO and management within the system to approve any enhanced risk assessments if you want to. So that's a really important one, because you might want to streamline some of this and remove bottlenecks, but you might want to be an overall reviewer and just check the things that are coming in. So you can set it up to do that. by assigning the correct roles and permissions. And this risk plan is there for you to use with the client, both at the start of the relationship and on an ongoing basis. It will detail what the enhanced risks are, what you're doing to mitigate those risks, and it will be stored in the client file and downloadable as well. And once you've done everything you need to, you'll then see that your client record looks really nice. You see that everything's up to date and you've got everything you need in that client record, should you have to then go and have a conversation about why they're a high risk or what you've done to mitigate it. So we keep everything there, and then all that we need to do is renew it when it comes back in for review. So the ID check and risk assessments will be flagged as review or renewal once each year. And you can change that renewal date, by the way. The ID checks say review because we're not saying you have to go and run another ID check once each year, but you might want to review it. And the way that you would review it would be dependent on the client risk assessment renewal that you do. So when you renew your client's risk assessment, there'll be a tailored template for that as well. And that template will ask you a series of questions like, has the name of the individual changed? Has their address changed? Have the services we provide changed? Have we checked they've not been sanctioned throughout the year? Have they been added to any politically exposed persons lists? So it's a shorter risk assessment, but it flags any key changes to the relationship that would impact the money laundering risk, and it has to be done on a regular basis. And the outcome of that annual risk assessment would indicate whether you do need to review that ID check or not. Because if they've changed their name, for example, or their address, you might want to get extra evidence. So we put it in there to help you. We're not saying you have to renew it each year. Another thing you might want to look to do is run a basic check each year, because what a basic check will do is check that they're not politically exposed or added to any sanctions lists. So you might want to have that in as a regular stopgap anyway to support with your ongoing client risk assessment. And that is the system in a nutshell. I just want to show you how you can get started. So to get started, there'll be something on your accounts page. So if you're not an AML user, you can add it to your free trial. The current AML free trial is 30 days. It's going to change to 7 days within a week or so, I would believe. So I would take advantage of that if you can. And once you're on the AML free trial, you move to your contact hub. There'll be an onboarding journey for you to work through. That onboarding journey will make everything really easy. So it will help you assign the right roles and permissions to team members. It will tell you how to get started, and then it will land you on the client hub page. And on the client hub page, the first thing I'd recommend doing is getting this system nice and clean, because most of you at the minute will have empty ID check, empty risk assessment columns, and probably a few duplicate contacts. So what we've done is we've introduced functionality to make this migration a lot easier than it would have been if you'd used it a year ago. So the first thing is you can batch archive and batch hide any ex-clients. So ex-clients, irrelevant clients, you just need to hide them. So you can work on a very clean client list. And then once you've done that, you can also merge any duplicate contacts. If you've got any duplicates, you can either merge them, bulk merge them here, or merge them in individual records. And once you're happy that you've got the right list of clients on here, you can batch set their ID status. So to get started, you could say, okay, I know I need to do 3 ID checks on these 3 people. So you can bulk set them as to do. Similarly, you can do that with the risk assessment status. And similarly, you can do that with setting them as up to date. So if you've got a bulk of clients that you've just ID checked in another piece of software, you can set them as up to date, and you can say, remind me in, I don't know, whenever 17th of October 2024, because maybe then I want to look at doing a new and fresh ID check. And that's everything you need to know. I can see the questions cropping up. I'm going to move us back to the slides for a second. So something I just wanted to talk to you here about is security. So security here is of paramount importance because we're dealing with identification documents. So I just wanted to spend 20 seconds talking to you about the measures that we've taken to make this system super secure. So the first thing is we're not storing any of your client's personal data directly in GoProposal. We can't even access it. So if you noticed before when I went to click view report, it wouldn't do anything. It's not because it's broken, it's because I can't see anything. I can't see your client's information. So that's the first measure that we've taken, and we've blocked it for everybody. The data itself is encrypted by Thirdfort, who are a third party. They've been in this business for years. They know what they're doing with this. They're storing it on Google web servers and only using it for specific purposes that benefit you. I can get that information across and rather than talk to it. We have very regular penetration tests. We've actually done them on the third party as part of Sage, and we've done them on GoProposal. We do these regularly, and these just make sure we're not open or vulnerable to basically any cyber attacks. And we're regularly scheduling these penetration tests to keep things to the highest level of security. I can't tell you how much security is prioritized at Sage and within GoProposal. So real benefit of this system is the level of security you've got as well. And we've given you permission restrictions. So if you've got a big team and you maybe want them to be running risk assessments, or you want them to be running ID checks, in fact, I'm going to show you this, you can restrict what they can see. So if we go into our, if your clients are maybe saying, oh, I'm worried about you having my passport, my biometric data. If you go into the role of any individual here, you can see we've got different roles. You can set up team members with roles that do not permit them access to personal data on documents. So what that means is they could run a check, they could run a risk assessment, but somebody else on the team could review that. So just another stopgap that you can think about if you're really worried about this data being too widely available to everyone on the team. Lovely. So let's just talk about the pricing then. So I'm just going to focus on the bottom half because I think most of you are GoProposal members, so you know what it costs. So this is what we're going to charge for the solution. So you pay the base fee, which is to use the risk assessments, to have the system that's constantly telling you what you need to do, and all of that is between £30 to £70 a month, depending on basically how many clients you have, how many risk assessments and KYC assessments you need to do. So it can be from £30 for that add-on. And then we've implemented a pay-per-check model. So there's no commitment. You don't have to sign up to a bundle or any credits for the checks. You can do them as and when you need to do them. So if you've got more one month and less another month, you can use the pay-per-check model. And the reason we've done that is because we've found that our members have been really frustrated when they can't roll credits over, when they're buying credits and it isn't relevant to the months that they're in. So you only have to pay per check, and those are the prices in front of you. There are a lot of introductory offers going out this week for people that want to take action now. So for those of you that are wondering what the next steps are, you're really keen to get started, you'll get an email straight away after this session. That session will direct you to booking a call with the client success team, who can help you abstract value from the system, make sure that all of your questions are answered. But if you're ready already without needing to book a call, there's an exclusive introductory offer in your emails that's going to be sent after this call. So the exact nature of that offer will depend on where you are in your GoProposal journey, but everybody gets something. So we'll send that across. Great. At this point, I'm going to move over to the questions. So I've not read anything for the past 40 minutes, so let's have a look. Michelle, yeah, we're going to be, I think you've got to be transparent about pricing. Yeah, just to justify, the biometric check is very expensive. And yes, that's because it's using biometric technology. So you'd struggle to find a biometric check that's under sort of £10, I think. And that's just because of what it's doing and how accurate and how reliable it is. I mean, the cost of the biometric can be compared to the cost of actually having to set up a meeting with your client on Zoom, having them hold up their passport, and then looking to check that that passport is the person that you're dealing with, or going and seeing them face to face. The cost of doing all that and gathering all of the information, I think, can be equalized to the cost of a biometric. But you can use a document check, which is what you're probably paying in the £4 to £5 region for. We've also seen a wealth of clients get really be really successful in charging for onboarding. So we know this is a heavily debated topic, but the concept of it is working well. I know there's a few clients on this call who are actually doing this or planning on doing this. So they're actually just offsetting the cost of the AML or the ID check to the end user. So it's also something to think about. So I'm going to move on to the Q&A. And then Val's here in case there's anything that I need her to support on.
Yeah, I was just going to add something. If you don't mind for that one, because you say about people charging for AML. What I'm finding also that what a lot of people are doing is, instead of just calling it AML, they're talking about compliance, because there are a lot of compliance issues around the work that all of you do. And perhaps they're thinking that if they do it as an onboarding cost, then they're not really covering the ongoing monitoring aspect of what it is that you have to do to make sure that you keep it up to date. So compliance is good.
Thank you for that, Val. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I'm going to work through these questions then here. So how does the system handle ID checks for non-UK residents? Yeah, so non-UK residents, you can run a biometric check, because if they're not in the UK, the chances that you're going to go and be able to go and see them face to face are very low. So you'll want to run a biometric identity check to verify their identity, and then you'll want to verify their, you can also verify their international address as well. So we've got that within the biometric flow. If you want to go and have a look at it, when you sign up to the trial, you can play around and see everything. You can run a check or two to experience it. Have we got a policy template, Izzy? We probably do. That's one for Val to maybe help us out with, that we can send if people want to drop me an email and they do want a policy template. But just tying back to what we were talking about before, not seeing it as a checkbox exercise, maybe using that as a basis, but actually going in and thinking, okay, how am I going to verify my clients? How am I going to assess them, and making sure that we keep that up to date. But I think we've got a template we can share. Is that right, Val? Yeah. So we will share that if anyone wants to.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Me now regretting getting like 55 emails. I'll put that in the chat for everyone. Does the system facilitate ID checks for individuals not in the UK? Yep, it does. It supports international verification. Does it offer ongoing monitoring like Smart Search? That is not something we've got at the moment, but we have got that system in place that reminds you to regularly review your client risk assessments and your client ID checks. The ongoing monitoring element, for the time being, if you want to use our system, there are things that you can do. So if there's a sanctions list that you can sign up to. Val, do you know what this one is? Yeah, go on.
Well, I'd say, because in reality, in terms of them, when they do that, they do the ongoing monitoring in terms of updating you, it's going to be for a small proportion of your clients that's going to be really relevant, because it's going to be ones that are either at risk of being on a sanctions list, or alternatively at risk of becoming a PEP. But you know, so when you look at the definition of what that is, it's a fairly limited a number. So and I think that probably you would know your clients well enough. If there's changes that mean that they've got elected as an MP, then you'd actually know about that, if that makes sense. On the sanctions, what you can do is you can go to the OFSI's website, and we can send you a link in terms of where that is, where you sign up for their email alerts. And what will happen then is that when somebody is added to or taken off of the sanctions list, then you'll get an email alert. Now, I was saying to Danielle yesterday that when the Ukraine stuff started, you were probably getting 2 or 3 emails a day, because it was so rapidly moving, whereas now it's maybe 1 a week, and you can just quickly look at that and see whether it impacts any of your clients and then move on. So that's what I'd suggest was useful.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good. So there are ways around the lack of that feature. For now, if you do want to start bringing things into one place, and remember you've got those annual reviews as well. What if the client doesn't have any photo ID? Val, could you support me on that one, please? That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think if you've got a client that doesn't have any photo ID, what you need to do is to go back to what they'd need in order for them to be able to get photo ID. So, you know, sort of like generally speaking, what you're doing is you're going back to things like birth certificates and marriage certificates, if that's what it is that they've got. And very often government-based documentation, if that makes sense. So, you know, sort of like correspondence that goes directly to them from HMRC. If you look at the CCAB guidance, they'll say that, you know, if they've got something from the Department of Works and Pensions, if they've got, you know, anything that's along those sorts of lines, then and anything from HMRC, then those are seen as being proof of both ID and address, although you'd need to have more than one document in terms of what it was that you were doing. So you'd go back to those records.
That's helpful. And the other one is what did Jodie just asked a question. She said, yeah, what happens how long does it take for the photo to upload? So Jodie, with the basic check, which doesn't require a passport or a driver's license, I'm going to go back into the software to show this to people. Then it will come back within sort of 30 seconds to a minute. Now with the document and biometric check, because we're waiting on your client to complete it, it's impossible to say how long it takes. We've done tons of thousands of tests with this. So as soon as the client does do the process, it's very, very quick to come back to you. I would also mention as well that we will chase the client. So for example, with the biometric check, Third Thought send your client a text message regularly to let them know it still needs completing to take away some of that heavy lifting. Similar with the document check again, you can set up automatic chasers so you don't have to do that. And something that was really interesting that came from our beta period was one of our clients said that because it's presented in such a professional way to the end user, their client is much quicker at responding to it than if they were sort of emailing them manually. So I think that's a really useful thing to bear in mind as well when we're thinking about response rates to these types of things. Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent. So hi Patrick. Patrick said, I run the will writing part of my practice through a separate company. Should that company not regulated by the ICAW carry out these checks? Definitely you, Val.
Yes, I think so. And I think that the issue would be that, so looking at it, I think will writing on its own, if that's all that it is that you do, maybe isn't a regulated service in terms of AML. But if you couple that with sometimes setting up trusts as part of what it is that you do, then that definitely goes into a regulated sector. So you would need to be supervised by somebody when you when you're doing that. So if it's not the ICAW, then it would need to be another body in terms of what it was that you were doing. And yeah, you should still make sure that you know your client and do the checks.
Thanks. And Michael's just asked, for a company with non-executive directors, is it necessary to do ID checks on the non-executives?
Again, I'd say that really depends in terms of what it is that you're doing. So I think that, you know, if the non-executive directors are non-executive directors because they just because of advice that they're giving into the company and that they don't have a financial stake within the company, then potentially you won't need to do them. But I think that will be part of something that would, you know, you'd be driven down the route in terms of what you're doing with your risk assessments to do them. I think that probably if you looked at it in terms of a charity, for example, there's a lot of advice that's out there, and some people just do take the view that they would do all of the trustees of the charity in terms of what it is that they do, and other people will go down the line, which I think I would support, that what you do is you do the key office holders. So you might do the chairman, the treasurer, and the vice chair if that's what they've got, and then if there's somebody who's a decision maker that's employed, then you would do that as well. So I think that the answer to that is maybe, which it might not be very helpful, but you know, sort of you have to look at the circumstances and look at the role that they're actually playing, and how they fit into the equation to determine whether it's necessary.
Thanks, Val. And someone said they love your hair, just as a side note.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. So Simon said, are the PEP sanction adverse media checks in the basic check a one-off snapshot or ongoing monitoring? So just to make you aware, there's PEP sanction and adverse media check in every check, regardless of whether you do basic document or biometric, you'll get that result. But they are a snapshot in time at the minute. And then the ongoing monitoring element, you could set up a process where you maybe run one of these checks every year, every 6 months, or you can, if you want to kind of save on costs, you can check those watch lists that Val said, so you can just subscribe and get an email update every time there's a new sanctioned country or individual. Is this compatible with the ICB for bookkeepers? Hi, Jodie. So we're going to get this question a lot, so I think I might just address it for the wider case. Is it compatible with my governing body? So the governing body will set out the rules as around to what it is you should be doing, and then it's for you to decide how you're going to do it and how you're going to implement it. So we are giving you in the software so far the risk assessments, the KYC assessments, and the ID checks, and we're giving you the tools to do these to the maximum levels of compliance. So it's hard for me to say yes, it's compatible, but it gives you what you need to do, what you should be doing. Obviously, there's things outside of GoProposal that you still need to manage, like the policies and the firm-wide assessments. With the ICB specifically, I'm not sure. I know they have a risk assessment solution of their own, so I think you can use ours. I think you would just need to also make sure that you're fulfilling the risk assessment bit within their platform. You could run the ID checks, for example, because I don't think there's a system for that in the ICB. I hope that helps. Sam said, is there an AML KYC charge line in Oversuite? So you can, it's in GoProposal at the minute. There's no service schedule for it, but I don't think there really needs to be. Val, you'll be able to correct me for that if you're wrong, but if you charge...
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Because I think that you cover, the terms and conditions actually cover your responsibilities for the AML side of stuff. So I don't think you need to have a service schedule for that.
Yeah, so you can just start charging it without a service schedule there, because the T's, like you say, the T's and C's say you have to pay us for the work that we billed for in that proposal. Ryan's asked, on a basic check, we will verify the documents manually ourselves. Are we able to upload a copy of this document into the system so that it's kept together with the basic check report? Yeah, that's a really great point. We don't facilitate uploading identity documents to the software right now, so the only way to store it within the client record would be to automatically collect it and through the biometrical document. And that's just security and data protection. I mean, we do want to be able to do this, but we need to make sure that we're creating when we do it, that the upload system that we bring into place is super secure and super rigid and can't be accessed. So we are looking at it, and I'm very keen to get that one on. If there's anyone else that thinks that would be useful, do let me know, because it will help with my prioritization in terms of what's next. We are considering GoProposal for new clients. How easy is it to bring existing clients into the AML function without creating a new proposal? Yeah, so I'll show you what to do here. So the way to migrate over to the system would be to go onto the client hub for starters. If you're brand new to GoProposal, the best thing to do would be to import your client list. So if you've got a client list already that you can get into a CSV format from another piece of software, or you integrate with any of our practice management pieces, which are Centre, Carbon, and Accountancy Manager, then you should be able to import from either that practice management integration, which you can set up from here, or from a CSV file. Once you've imported your customers, you'll have your customer list on the client hub. Then you just want to go through and bulk set statuses. So if you've already done, say, 5 ID checks already recently, then you can set their ID check status as up to date. And if you've done 5 risk assessments recently, you can do the same, and you can also set them as action required. So that would be the way to migrate. Just take advantage of the bulk options on the client hub, and you can leave things as up to date and coming back to renewal for existing clients. Did that answer your question there, Andrew, hopefully? Does it do a whole practice risk assessments? We don't have the firm-wide assessment at the minute. That is something we're looking to give you guys as an available resource alongside the policy template, alongside, was it just, no, it was just those two. So we are going to be working on that next. So we're going to give you access to a resource hub. So if you pay for AML for GoProposal, we're going to give you access to an exclusive resource hub where you can download things like a firm-wide assessment and a policy, whilst we're working on getting those into the software. How much was the most advanced check with biometrics? The biometric check is about £10.20. Will this integrate to Accountancy Manager to mark the AML as complete? Really great shout. So we're going to investigate the integration side next. So we're going to look at that, look at the various other requests you guys have got, and think about priorities there. Again, if anybody thinks that would be something that they need to be able to get value, then please let me know so we can work on the prioritization of the next steps over the next couple of weeks. What systems can you import contacts from? So that's Accountancy Manager, Centre, Carbon, and if anyone unsuccessful here can correct me if I've got anything wrong there, but those are the 3 at the minute, and then you can also import from a CSV as well. So Elizabeth, depending on So if you're already using AML, then it wouldn't be a 30-day free trial. You can just start using the checks. You'll get a special offer in your email. You just need to reply to that email instead. But if you haven't used the AML functionality and you want to add it on from the accounts page, you get 30 days of using it for free and running ID checks before you need to pay for anything. I don't mean the ID checks, by the way, they can never be free, but the rest of it. Who would check the company's AML checks outside of the business to ensure they are compliant? When would they need this? Go on. I think that would be
To answer that one.
bodies.
Okay. So I think that if you look within the regulations and the rules for the individual, what the individual professional bodies would expect, they would say that you should do an annual compliance review. Now, that annual compliance review can be done by somebody internally, or it can be done by somebody externally. So I do that for some firms in terms of what it is that I do. I think that what they would expect you to do in those circumstances is to have a review to make sure that your policies and procedures and so on were up to date, but then to select a sample of clients at random and check the AML information that you've got for those people, so that you can make sure that things are working as they should. Now, some firms put their own little, depending on the size and the amount of changes that you have with clients, some people have their own little procedures that will be in place, that they might have somebody designated within their practice that will routinely select a couple of new clients and a couple of people that you've just recently done accounts for example, to make sure that the ongoing monitoring has been done, or the KYC has been done for those, just so that they can catch anything as it's going through. But the answer there really is that you should be doing an annual compliance review for your procedures.
Thanks for that. Are you looking at a way to monitor changes and notify of those changes ongoing? Yeah, Kat. So this would be, this is definitely something that we're looking at. I can't give you a date or anything like that at the minute, but I do think that is a big request from you guys. So we will look into that, absolutely. And we'll be setting up some calls with the people that are online and signed up just for over the next couple of months, see how you're getting on with the ID checks, look at the next features to prioritize. I know there's quite a few little bits that we can improve, and then over the next year we'll probably focus on improving it, making it even better for you guys, before then looking at like a big bet like an ongoing monitoring module. If you're introducing AML and KYC for the first time, is there a downloadable step-by-step guide as how to start? There is indeed. So if you're using AML, so there's lots of help guides now online. If you go on to help.goproposal.com, go into the GoProposal AML tab, there's tons of help articles now available for this to help to support you with this. So we've got how to get started, what to do, how to run an ID check. We've actually got a deep dive into the biometric ID check, because the biometric ID check is something that you might want to guide your clients through, or that they might ask you about. So there's a whole article on that as well, plus some common questions like how to deal with pet hits, what to do if your client's an enhanced risk and things like that. So there's an exhaustive FAQ guide now available on there. I'd love for you to answer this one, Val, because I feel like ongoing monitoring comes up a lot, and it's what are the requirements around ongoing monitoring of PEPs and sanctions? Is reviewing annually sufficient? Our current provider has an ongoing monitoring list that checks are added to after the initial PEP sanction check, and the report back to us daily on this.
I think that, as with anything that you do here, a lot of this is going to be on a risk basis. So if you'll know if you're dealing with sort of Fred Smith, who runs the local greengrocers, who sort of like is a UK resident, has been here for all of their lives, realistically it is so unlikely that they're going to go onto the sanctions list. And as I said to you earlier on, I think that with the PEPs, if you look at the list of what constitutes there being a PEP, then you will know, in terms of the types of clients that you're dealing with, the types of people that are going to move into that area. And my expectation would be that they'd probably talk to you about some of the stuff before they actually move into it. So my view in terms of this is that when you do your ongoing monitoring, And whatever your time break is that you've decided within your policy for doing the ongoing monitoring, which if it's an enhanced risk client, I don't think should ever be less than a year. Sorry, more than a year. If it's a normal risk client, then you might do that on an annual or a 2-year cycle, maybe, in terms of what it is that you do. And the different professional bodies are, you know, sort of in terms of what they would expect from you. But I think that if it's, you know, for your normal everyday client, then just entering that in as part of your ongoing monitoring process is probably fine. If you're dealing with somebody who's a Russian national or from Iran, or you know, one of the areas where we know that there are real, North Korea, where there's real issues in terms of sanctions and so on, then I think that you'd subscribe to the OFSI sanctions list. And as I say, what they do is they just give you details then when they send the email through about people that have been added or people that have been taken off, so that you can see that. I hope that helps really. Yeah.
It is. And someone said, could you do the biometric check using the driver's license? You can. So the biometric check will take many forms, many valid forms of identity in the UK and abroad. So you are fine with that. Do we run checks on companies? Not at the moment. So again, one for the future. I've got a list here of the things, and we're going to bring you guys onto some focus groups as to what you see us doing next, and what you think would be of most value. But thanks for that feedback. Will there be a full length video made that we can send to the clients to show them the process for the £5.821? We don't have that at the minute. So a video of the document check. But again, we can do that. We can definitely do that if it's useful. Let me know how you get on with that one, Chris. And if you want something, I can get something together for you. If we stopped our GoProposal subscription, we will still have access to the checks and records within GoProposal. Yeah, good point. So I haven't actually thought about that one, to be honest. I'm going to take that one away. I think that at the minute you would be asked to go and download everything, make sure that you can get all your information onto your computer before you stop using GoProposal. Obviously, really important thing to do anyway if you do stop using a piece of software. But I will find out what the reality of that situation is for you. Would you suggest running checks yourself if there are existing clients that you have already met previously? So if you've met them in the past, I'm trying to figure out what you mean by that. Sorry. So if you've met them before, would you run the checks yourself? Yeah, so I think you mean if you've already met them, do you need to do a biometric check, or can you just run a basic by yourself? So yeah, if you've met them in the past, I don't see, if you're comfortable that you've got a valid, up-to-date identity document for that person, and there's no need to do it again. The only thing I would say is just make sure that what you have got on your client files for your existing clients you're comfortable with. So you're comfortable with the risk assessment that you've got, you're comfortable with the level of evidence of verification you've got. That's all that I'd say there.
Can I add something anecdotally? And what it is that you've got there is that, you know, obviously some of you are going to have been within the profession for long enough that you can remember when AML first came in. And it was really in 2007 where we started to have to do ongoing monitoring. And what happened when we started to have to do the ongoing monitoring was that there was, I think, a fairly widespread view that said that if you said, you know, I've known this client for 20 years, I've met them face to face, you know, sort of I've delivered stuff back to their personal address, that having all of those little bits that you had, that you could say, look, there's no need for us to get any ID or anything else. But I think that there seems to be an ongoing ripple underneath there to suggest that what they would like is that you would actually have something physically that wasn't just anecdotally saying, I've known this person forever, that you would, within the system, have your proof of ID and your proof of address, which, you know, sort of, so yeah, I just sort of like say that now you are seeing some of the regulators that are going back and saying, look, we don't think that just that 1 or 2 liner that you've got there that says we've known them since the year dot, they've been a client since we started, is enough for you to do without having actually something formal in place.
Thank you, Val. And I know somebody's asked about the firm-wide assessment, quite a few people have. When can you see it? Where are we with that? So I think we've got that now ready. Yeah, we got I just need to make some amendments to it. So if you can give us a week, I can please email me as well with your name so I can send it you until we get that resource hub up and running. but we'll be able to get that within the next week or so, alongside the policy templates. So if you need these sorts of resources, just ask. We're not sort of shy of supporting you with them. Will the checks also include insolvency, disqualified directors, and law enforcement? I'm not too sure what that one means, Val. Do you have an idea there? Oh, yes, I do know what you mean. When you're running the ID check, can you get that sort of information? So you definitely get police record, date of birth validation as well, the MLZ record, insolvency and disqualified directors, and
I would think they probably will, because of the fact that they do the adverse publicity, don't they? So where they're doing the adverse publicity checks, they have to be for insolvency, it has to be published still within the London Gazette or whatever it is, and I would have thought that would have been picked up as part of it. Yeah,
that makes sense. Thank you. If a client has provided us ID outside of GoProposal, is it possible to upload the documents? I've answered that one already. I do think that one's a good one for the future. Where do you source your data from when conducting an AML? You mentioned Experian. Is there anywhere else? I haven't got the list in my head, but again, I can absolutely get that to you. I'll make a note of your name. So the guys at Third Foot will have that. I know for a fact it's definitely Experian. We definitely use Onfido as well, on the biometric side, but I will triple check the exact list. Probably in a help article, actually, if you want to check through those as well. Can the client list risk assessment result be exported as a CSV file? Not at the minute. Great shout, that. Love that idea. To help with the whole annual firm reviews. There you'd be looking at the risk of the client and things like that. There's not a two-way integration with Centre for this specifically at the minute. I'm just thinking, is there a way around that? I'm not sure how you use Centre, Patrick, but is there a way to set up a line item for AML that connects to an AML workflow in Centre, that if the proposal was accepted because you knew you were doing the AML in GoProposal, it could then mark that as done in Centre? I might be completely off the mark, but that's how I remember those integrations working. Again, I want to see how I want to understand how that could work. So it'd be good to jump on a call about that, because with as many people as possible, just so we can map out what that could look like. Can we export the contact list? So contact list export. The bulk merge isn't working. We've got duplicate contacts. So you could go into each contact individually and merge them with the right record. You could do it that way, Gareth. Exporting the contact list, I'm not sure is a feature at the minute, unfortunately. Yeah, you can get, so what you can do is on the report, Jodie, if once you've run a check, you'll get a copy of the report, and on that report there'll be an identity document and the passport or the driver's license, and it will be stored on the identity document, so you can download it and pull it out to store it in the CRM for sure. I've answered that. When taking on a limited company, do we have to run a company check? So the company check is all about understanding, who the directors are, who the beneficial owners are, where the company is operating, and if there's any further companies behind them. So you don't have to run a company check, and Val will correct me if I'm wrong. It's just, you just have to know how that business operates and what the structure looks like. And I think what the company checks help with is they pull information from Companies House to give you a starting point. I'd just be careful with Companies House, because you are as the accountant, you have the responsibility to actually be making sure Companies House is up to date. Am I right there, Val, as well?
You have a responsibility as an accountant to report if the information, particularly on the PSC register at Companies House, is inconsistent with your understanding of what's with the business. So I think, there is an expectation that you will validate if somebody comes in and says, this is my company. Yeah, that you actually go through the process of validating to make sure that you're happy that that is a bona fide company, and that the ownership records coincide with what your expectations are.
Thanks for that. And I think it's a really great question from Michael Braun here, which I'm not sure on. What are the rules for retaining and deleting records for disengaged clients? Okay. Is it not they have to keep them for 3 years still?
Nope. It's very clear in terms of what it is. So you have to keep the records that you have around AML for your clients for the whole period of your engagement with the client, and then for 5 years afterwards. So that's the minimum in terms of where it is. You might need to keep records for different purposes for a bit longer, but in terms of the AML information, you have to keep it for a period of 5 years, for the whole period of the engagement and for 5 years after you cease to act.
Great, thank you. Awesome, I think that's everything. I've gone through the chat box, so thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate the time to show you this. It's been a long time in the making, and I'm really excited to see how you guys get on as you start adopting it. We have run a lot of beta periods, so we've made sure that everything is running smoothly. And I just drop me emails with your feedback. You know, it'd be great to keep things moving. This isn't the end. Thanks, Levi. It's very much the start for emails, really. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, guys, for coming.